Hello, everyone, and welcome to the General Movie CouchBlab podcast. 'Tis a silly podcast today, since today we're talking about Monty Python and the Holy Grail from 1975. This will be the first comedy we've ever talked about on this show. And here today I'm with my two hosts.
I'm Tiffany.
I'm Hope.
And I'm Ben, and essentially we're just going to go over general thoughts about the movie and what we experienced when we watched it, and some of our general things about the movie. But before we get into that, what is you guys' experience with this movie?
When we watched it with a couple friends back when I was in college, it was the first time I ever experienced something related to the Monty Python troupe. That's, people like John Cleese, Terry Gilliam, etc., etc. I wasn't familiar with the original content in which they produced. I had never seen the original series. So watching this it was a massive eye-opener. I got to see kind of the comedic genius behind some of the people, some of the different types of, jokes that they would deliver. And all of them really, really knocked it out of the park. And then, to my excitement, I realized that this is not the only thing in which they create in terms of their content. There's so much more to follow up with. So I think that was a major treat to see.
Would you say this is like their most famous piece of work they've done?
Oh, definitely. It's their most famous piece, but it's not their only piece.
Oh, yeah.
And basically, in terms of the kind of content that they create, I probably would say it's about their best. Although there is a lot of other films that, have been recognized for their, creative genius from this troupe, as well as the original TV show. So anybody that checks out this film would be more than happy, checking out their original kind of content which they produce.
Yeah. So, Hope, what are your opinions about the movie in general?
Well, my opinion, I saw the movie a lot earlier, when I was really little. And, I did think it was pretty funny at the time, but, I don't know what it is, but I would always fall asleep before the end, and I never actually got to see the ending to Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Until
what ending?
Exactly. The part where they all get arrested at the end, and the film just kind of unceremoniously stops. Everything after the bridge scene with Tim would always, I don't know what it was. It's just, I would just fall asleep. But the rest of the movie, I enjoyed the humor. My sister could never get it. It was, English, a little bit subtler humor.
Yeah, I think
I enjoyed it.
If we get enough Patreon subscribers, we gotta start selling a Hope narcolepsy shirt.
Yeah, basically with a lot of the stuff that this movie delivers on, it's very, dry humor. So I guess if you're not really particular to that type of humor, you're going to struggle with it a little bit. But if you're willing to deal with a little bit of dry, sarcastic wit, mixed into your filmmaking, then you'll definitely come to appreciate it. It's a lot of the jokes you're going to have to think a couple minutes more before you finally get it.
Yeah, but simply saying just, we could go all day about how this movie is hilarious. But everyone knows that at this point. But what I actually wanted to bring up was something I didn't realize until watching it again recently, that I don't think many people actually discuss about this that often, that this movie came out right in the middle of the 70s, and it's obviously made on a cheap budget. That's part of its charm and hilarity. But it's kind of interesting the way it sort of almost acts like a comedy of itself, not just towards medieval gimmicks, but to exploitation films at the time, because there's a lot of elements of an exploitation film in this movie, and yet it somehow doesn't come across at first as one. Mainly, I guess, because it's a comedy, so they can get away with doing a lot more. But, there's just so many elements to exploitation films in this movie that I didn't even realize until I watched it recently, because there's just, a certain, I don't know, cheat charm to it, I would say.
Well, how so? Because
Can you elaborate on that? Yeah, I don't know what you mean by exploitation films.
Well, again, it's going off, themes from, there were medieval type exploitation movies at the time that kind of did the same thing, where it's like they try to dress the parts and look all the thing, but obviously with the budget they couldn't really film like extraordinary battles or big landscapes or stuff like that. They would have to resort to like small models or like budget cuts of like a lot of people standing shot type stuff. And even just some of like the jokes like point out like the loose ends and ties to like the filming of this thing, obviously, where it has jokes that make fun of the fact that they don't have horses because they couldn't afford it, or like they'll do jokes where somebody off camera like is like changing something at the moment while the story's going. Basically, they're breaking the fourth wall at points intentionally in this movie.
If the credits didn't tip you off already on that, yeah,
like it does things, especially the ending itself, which again is like you see something off from the outside of the camera coming into the movie as an element to just stop it mid-production.
Well, there's plenty of movies out there that kind of make fun of the fact that they don't have the budget to do what they want to. Does that necessarily qualify that as an exploitation film as well? Like, what singles this one out specifically?
I think it's also, I also bring up the part where Lancelot goes on a murderous rampage. If you actually take a look, actually at a lot of the deaths in this movie, they're made off to play for laughs, obviously, but there's like really quick shots of like exploitative gore type stuff shots. Like, it's when the rabbit kills somebody for the first time. It does like a subtle quick little shot of like a giant blood that looks obviously fake blood, but it's like excessive amount just put on the body to like make it even more like over the top sort of thing. It also goes again for the Sir Lancelot scene where he like starts killing a bunch of people. Well, it's just in an excessive way. And I see a lot of that stuff in like exploitation movies at the time, where it's like something that shouldn't really be all that big and outrageous of a kill, all of a sudden like shoots gallons upon gallons of blood out of a person.
Well, the filmmaking industry follows trends, so like keep in mind it came out during 75, and 75 was when a lot of those movies were at the height of their popularity, due to the fact that you had a lot of exploitation films and you had adult theaters and all that different kind of stuff where, you know, that type of content would get featured. So I think it uses it in a different way and in an effective one in order to make its story funnier. But that's not to say that, you know, while the filmmakers were making it, they probably went to a theater or they just saw the content that was coming out around them and it, you know, drew inspiration back into their work.
Yeah. So, another thing about this movie is, well, we talked about the budget, and surprisingly, they did manage to get away cleverly with a lot of like in jokes based on with the humor based on their budget alone. As we mentioned before, they don't have horses in the movies, but they obviously have coconut shells that they just clot together. I actually found out that, again, the only reason they did that was they couldn't afford horses.
Oh, yeah. I mean, every time that the film can't afford to do something, it makes you very fully aware of the fact in which they're like, we'd like to do this, but since we're stuck in the situation, let's bring humor out of it. One of the strengths of Monty Python is that, you know, they do a lot to make you aware of what's going on in their, you know, studio, in their world, and they don't try to pull any punches from trying to be honest about, you know, how they feel about the filmmaking industry or just a lot of different situations in general. They try to derive some sort of humor out of it. That's kind of where that, you know, British dry wit comes from.
Yeah. Another thing being that when we get to like the character Tim, and that like that's one of the funniest jokes in the movie, right? However, the only reason his name is Tim to begin with is because apparently John Cleese, who was playing Tim, didn't even realize that he had forgotten the name during the line read, so he just made it up on the fly. That was ad-libbed, and they just went with it through the rest of the movie.
Given a troupe like Monty Python, I'm pretty sure this wouldn't have been their first nor their last time doing ad-lib. You know, I'm not aware of any other time that they've done it, but I'm pretty sure, you know, as long as the comedy is more important, they would just stick with whatever worked best.
Like, because, you know, you can get those, like, sparks of genius in the middle of production that you just have to capitalize on, you know?
Yeah, it's best to take it within the moment.
But So, what exactly do you feel like? Do you feel like this movie still holds up as well as it does, like, back all the way back in 1975? Do you think it's gotten better over time? Worse? Do you think it's, like, not as funny as it once was? Like, what's your general thoughts on it?
I mean, personally, I think it still holds up because, like, it was like technically, it was a low budget film to start, so that, like, you know, like, we can recognize right away in the modern day that it is low budget. Comedy wise, there's a few bits that I'm not gonna get, like the flying llama, like the flying circus thing, like the llama joke. I'm not gonna be able to get that unless I've also seen that series, like, because they were a lot bigger at the time, but, like, today, if I'm just going in, just watching this movie, I wouldn't get it without, like, further reference. But otherwise, like, the jokes all land, timing's pretty well. I guess it's just that movie, like, it's just that ending where it just kind of peters out, and I'm like, I'm tired. Other than that, I think it's okay.
Well, that I don't know if half of that is just from the actual movie or from, like, your track record of watching movies and conking out halfway.
No, I would agree with him there.
That's my opinion. You asked my opinion. There it is.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, you're not the first person to be kind of at odds with the ending. We watched this recently with our friend. And at the end of it, he wasn't really aware that, you know, the ending basically concludes with, you know, the actor getting arrested, and then it just kind of cuts to credits. When our friend watched it, immediately he just says, "Wait, so where's the real ending?" And he was just like, "Oh, well, that is the real ending." And he got so mad, he went to Google to try to see if he could find out if there was an alternative ending, and found out.
He made us actually look up on the extras on the Blu-ray to see if the actual ending was hidden. Because he didn't honestly believe that was the ending to the movie.
I mean, perhaps the musical would have mixed a little bit better with him. I don't know. You know?
Well, like, that's kind of part of the charm of it, is that it's so bizarre and out there, and if you're familiar with the original content of Monty Python, it goes for one place to the other because it's a series of sketches, so I can believe that they would just want to, like, end it on something that's so, like, out there and anticlimactic because it works for the humor of the film.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I wouldn't know how else to end it. Like, when I finally did see that ending, I was just like, oh yeah, that makes sense, you know.
Well, originally it was
in film canon, not actual time sense.
Oh, well, actually, originally it was supposed to end with somewhat of a big field battle scene, but again, as I've mentioned plenty of times already, the budget prevented that, so they had to come up with something. So they came up with the whole dead animator investigation.
The dead historian.
Oh, yeah.
Dead historian.
It was the dead historian.
Oh, yeah, excuse me. Just cut that bit out.
No, leave it in.
Oh, no. I have a flaw? No.
Yeah, but basically...
An error in my podcast?
No, I'm perfect, don't you know?
Yeah, but basically, I think, to summarize, the film still holds up pretty well. If you haven't had the chance to see it, please do. You don't really have to be a fan of the original Monty Python, series in order to really enjoy it. It's the kind of film where you don't have to go in knowing about flying circus to really appreciate it. They planned it out to just kind of be, something on its own and have kind of this, full story together rather than a series of sketches like the original TV show. So you can appreciate it on its own merits at any point.
Just on a quick note, actually, before we end this thing, why don't we each go over quickly, just like briefly, just say what's your favorite joke from this movie? Really,
really briefly.
Yeah.
Keep it short. No essays.
I would probably say my favorite scene from this film is, it's a classic, basically, the "it's only a flesh wound" scene. Mainly because they always get a kick out of when he starts kneeling and praying and the guy just kicks him in the face and then continues to, go through with their battle. It's a really great scene. I don't want to start quoting or basically, describing it. I think it's something that if you haven't had the chance to see it, please go check it out. It's, one of those famous scenes from comedy that has to be seen to be appreciated.
I would have to say my favorite joke would be like the witch scene where they're putting her on trial and they're just like, oh, she's the witch, and she's just like, no, I'm not. And the guy being all like, "Oh, I was a newt. She turned me into a newt," and he's just like, "What? Got better." Yeah,
I got better.
I think the timing was just really nice on that.
Yeah, to think of my favorite joke. I mean, there's a bunch, but I probably would have to say, I just get a laugh every time I just see that Sir Lancelot scene running to go save
he's running from like 20 miles in the distance
through the cat, where yeah, and then it just pops up and starts literally slaughtering everybody, like, in quick succession. And then it's even funnier that after that whole scene and they come out with the situation, and he just starts he's almost like about to start doing it again. But hopefully, thankfully, he got stopped that time.
Yeah, I think my favorite thing is just because there's not really any music during that scene while he's running. They're kind of all just standing there minding their own business and just like, oh, what's that in the distance? The minute that he comes in and starts killing people is when the triumphant music just randomly kicks off. I think it sells the joke really well. But like I said, honestly, the best way to appreciate any of these jokes is going out to check out the film for yourself.
Yeah. Speaking of which, now you're probably wondering where you can find this. Obviously, it's on Blu-ray. You can find it pretty much anywhere. It's actually a pretty easy movie to find. I mean, this is something you could probably even find on Blu-ray, like at a Walmart or Target. Because, like, anywhere you go, they usually have this movie in particular on Blu-ray at somewhere. And for not that much, actually, because it's been a while, or around a while on Blu-ray, so you can pretty much pick it up for cheap.
There are some really, really nice collections out there available if you're really interested. Like, they have a lot of anniversary sets because the film is such a classic. And so I remember recently they had a really nice anniversary set that came with, like, plastic model, like, sheeps and pigs and all the stuff that they're throwing in the film. So that's probably the best anniversary set that's out right now if you're willing to shell out a couple extra bucks. It's a nice little novelty gift to basically have.
I personally like the version with the Japanese version of the film in there translated back into English so I can get the real experience.
Yes.
Watch it as it was meant to be watched,
Yeah, isn't there also, like, an extra that shows, like, the whole Camelot singing scene in Lego?
Yeah, there is. Animated by a different company, of course, but, like, done expertly.
Obviously that was made years before the Lego movie was even a thing. So, but it's
not everything
it's still
needs
really
to be
funny.
The Lego movie,
I think everything should be the Lego movie. This world would be a better place.
I don't want to live in that world.
There, in each basically special edition that they make for the copy of their film, they add an extra nice little treat for fans to enjoy. I remember one of them had, like, this documentary section on how, like, to do the horse galloping noise with 2 coconuts. So, like, each time they make a new version of it, they add something else to the content of it to really, bring a reason and a new, life to the film itself. So no matter which version you get, you're going to get a special treat.
Yeah. The movie alone in itself is just a pleasure enough to have in a collection if you're a comedy person. So anyways, if you want to hear more from us, you can support us via Patreon, and if you at least support at least $5 a month, you can get extra content eventually that we'll start making once we start hitting those Patreon subscribers. With 2 extra things such as movie commentaries and maybe possibly even TV episode commentaries. We'll also be doing a show called Girls Night Out where my 2 co-hosts here basically describe to me a weird movie essentially that in any sort of case is pandering usually to girls, whether it be bad or good. It's a good time to be had.
Yeah, and don't forget also to follow us on SoundCloud and YouTube in order to check out our extra content as well. All those links are going to be in the description below.
Yeah, come on, guys. Don't you guys want to make that subscriber count bigger? We're already at a whole 2 subscribers.
Make it bigger. Let's go.
Yay.
Wait, we got 2 subscribers? Oh, that's amazing that we have 2 already. Wow, it's really going.
Yeah.
Baby steps.
Yeah. Well, this has been an interesting first week, but again, we're going to keep doing this weekly. So, we'll be back next week with our horror podcast on Monday, which, by the way, I don't think we actually mentioned at any point during our first ever podcast that was the horror podcast for Monday. So, yeah, Mondays are the horror podcast, where we're going to be talking about the 1986 film Vamp.
Of course.
Yes.
It's a very good film.
Yeah.
It was nice.
Yeah. But that's for that podcast on Monday. So for right now, have a nice weekend, guys. I hope to see you guys next week, and I hope you guys can continue to enjoy our content. And thank you.
All right, then. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
Bye.